Years ago, a district superintendent contacted me about a church in eastern Kentucky that he wanted me to consider pastoring. He gave raving reviews about the church, and then he said, they filled out a self-evaluation form, and I'd like to send it to you via email. And I said, that would be wonderful. I'd like to read it, and I'm not sure God is calling me to move to a different church, but I would certainly pray about it and see what God has for me. Well, in the email, the evaluation talked about their strengths. And their strength that was mentioned the most was, we are a very loving congregation. In fact, those were their words, almost verbatim. Quite a few of them said, we're just a loving church. But then I got to the end where they said, what do we need in a pastor? And in that section they said, we need someone who will come in and help us unite together because we fight a lot. Apparently, they didn't see the issue there. They didn't see that being a loving congregation and fighting a lot was contradictory. There's a story of a professional actor in the Passion play in the Ozarks who's carrying a cross across the stage and up a street to the place of Golgotha. And while he's doing so, a heckler begins to really ride him hard. In fact, the heckler gets to him, and finally he throws down the cross, gets down, and he hits the heckler right in the face with his fist. Well, needless to say, after that play was over, the director came up to the actor and said, you just can't do that. You're playing the role of Jesus. And Jesus didn't retaliate when people did things like that to him. So I can't condone you being a part of that. So please don't do that again. Well, the man promised he wouldn't, but the next day, the heckler was back and even more vocal and more loud about what he wanted to do and say. So he began to yell at the actor, and the actor finally lost his cool again, stepped down off the stage, and punched the man out. The director, after the play, said, you're fired. I have to fire you. You cannot be behaving like that in this way while playing the role of Jesus. But the actor begged, oh, please, please, give me another chance. I really need this job, and I know I can handle it if it happens again. So the director reluctantly gave him another chance. The next day he's carrying his cross across the stage, and that same heckler is there. And he's shouting at him and mocking him. Finally, the actor, he held his best, but finally he couldn't take it any longer. He turned toward the heckler and pointed and said, I will meet you after the resurrection. You know, there are a lot of people who believe Christianity is that way. It's all about putting on a show. You show up on Sunday, you act a certain way, but when you get to work, you take off the gloves, you do whatever you want, you step on people, you abuse people. It's all about just being a part of a role, playing the role of a believer. Let's turn to 1 Corinthians 13. This is one of those passages of Scripture that you may have heard over and over again, and you feel maybe, there's really nothing left to learn from it. But I believe if we are growing as believers, we always have new areas to learn. Corinth was a metropolitan, cosmopolitan city. On the map, it's located between east and west, a major trade route. So it was a place for travelers in ships, and some perhaps on foot, to stop and prepare for the rest of their journey. And sometimes it was a matter of waiting for the weather to clear. And so often they would stay there all through the winter. Now, various cultures from all over the world came through Corinth. Most continued on their journey, but some stayed and made this city their home. Because of that, towering over the city was a temple dedicated to the worship of Aphrodite. Aphrodite is the goddess of love. In their worship of Aphrodite, and from their temple, they would send out over 1,000 or about 1,000 temple prostitutes nightly to ply their trade. The city was so immoral that a new word was coined and is still used today. To Corinthianize means to go to bed with a prostitute. Ancient Corinth was not only the center of worship for Aphrodite, but also for the god Dionysus. Dionysus also is known as Bacchus. We get our word debauchery from it, which means to indulge the sensual pleasures beyond what they should be indulged in. Dionysus was the god of wine and festivity. And the worship of this god was loud and out of control. So Corinth became a place where these two religions mixed. But during one of Paul's missionary journeys, the second to be precise, he stopped in Corinth, preached the gospel, and people responded. We might say, wonderful, wonderful news. That will help get them to the end of their problems. Well, yes, it is wonderful news. Whenever the gospel is preached and whenever someone responds, that's good news. However, the church in Corinth became Paul's most problematic church. It was in the letters to the Corinthians that he dealt with things like sexual immorality among believers, and lawsuits among believers, and disparities in worship and eating and caring for one another, and the misuse of spiritual gifts. You can see Paul's frustration in 1 Corinthians 11 when he says, "In the following directives, I have no praise for you, for your meetings do more harm than good." That's a sad commentary when a church's meetings do more harm than good. Just like the actor in the illustration, their idea of worship was to put on a show so that others might be impressed. In the last verse of 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul makes this statement, "And now I will show you the most excellent way." And what follows may be the greatest writing on love in the history of the world. This morning, I want us to peel away the exterior of our religiosity and ask, how do I love others? Do I love others with right motives? Another question we need to ask is, why is understanding God's love so important in a church? Well, first of all, by this love, we measure our dedication to God. Tina Turner, that great theologian, asked in a song, "What's love got to do with it?" Well, if she was speaking of the love that's in 1 Corinthians 13, I would answer, it has everything to do with it. Throughout Scripture, two qualities of God are highlighted: His holiness and His love. Other attributes are highlighted, but it's those two attributes that we see most often. Now, we've heard this verse